Welcome back to episode 35 of the Bench, powered by Wowhead. And if you are logged into the servers, congratulations, because Growl is not raiding inside a Blackwing lair. The servers are not getting DDoSed, although they might actually be getting DDoSed momentarily because Growl's going to be going live soon. Growl, what's been going on with the servers?
Bro, it's been chaos. I've never had like those hate Andes. You know, the people that just get mad about something and they just start going in all the chats. But so yesterday, my hardcore classic streamer content guild went to their had their final conclusion. So basically on Saturday, our guild we attempted to raid Blackwing Lair with the plans of just, this is basically it. The new raid's out, we'll clear it and then probably be done. However, we were facing some lag very early. It seemed like the servers were being DDoS, so we decided, okay, let's put it off for tomorrow. Servers are a little bit unstable. Got through half the raid. Start off the day, everything's looking good. Pull the boss. Immediately, just the biggest server, Omega. It was very clearly that it was targeted, and our entire guild DC'd, and it was every healer's worst nightmare. I'm just sitting here, I'm just watching my friends die. I'm just lagging out. My heals just won't cast, and yeah, I just come back into the game. Luckily, my character, for whatever reason, came out unscathed. I'm alive, but yeah, my entire guild's dead and everyone's quitting.
So this is like what? The third time that Blizzard has had major like third or fourth maybe time that the servers have been DDoSed this patch. I mean, as of time of recording this, apparently NA is down again, getting DDoSed on the authentication servers. What is going on?
Yeah, so I want to say this is like, okay, so first of all, this is like a narrative. I have no information and like there's nothing at all about this being true. This is just like what I like rumors about what I heard people saying. Is initially a couple of the DDoSes happened during the race to world first.
Yeah.
And there was some people trying to go along with the story that there was like more betting or money somehow involved, and that like they were trying, it was basically targeted towards certain guilds to try and win. That was like the narrative. And then now it's sort of been happening on its own for like no reason, and now it was like very clearly targeted towards our hardcore guild. And then now just later on, another DDoS attack happened during another like non-streamer hardcore guild where again, very specifically targeted on a specific boss at a specific time, and it wiped like 34 people out of 40. Very clearly, it's just people trying to cause trouble and get attention. I don't think there's any specific narrative here or like reason or target other than just trying to cause chaos, and it seems to be working.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, I feel like every weekend it's down at this point, which sucks. Like every weekend, midday, when everybody wants to play, NA servers are just dead. And that's not fun.
No,
Yeah, it's
it's
crazy.
not.
I can't believe it just seems like not real almost, right? Like I could understand like a one-off event of like something happening and then, like, oh man, that was crazy. It was some DDoS. And then a lot of those times you don't even know if it was a DDoS or some guy at the Blizzard server room spilled his coffee on something, right? You don't even know. But like clearly something is going on here where it's like day after day after day and like multiple things going on where it seems like on retail, it's like sort of random servers are getting affected. Like I noticed Illidan is like very often having problems, but like sometimes when I'm on like Sargeras or something, I don't notice it. But
Yeah, three is a pattern. Three weekends in a row of having caused the DDoS issues, and now
yeah,
a Monday as well. Like,
Well, they've announced
something's
that
going on.
They've announced that some of them were DDoS related. I don't know if all of them haven't necessarily been announced that they were DDoS related, but some of them were, which leads me to believe that most of them probably are.
Probably. I would imagine they are personally, but I don't remember like before this set. When was the last time we had like? I know they've happened in the past. When was the last time we had a DDoS on the WoW servers? Even it was a while, right?
I can't remember any. I'm
Expand.
sure there has been random occurrences like much shorter term than this, but I mean, since I started playing in BFA, I can't remember any instances of like. Yeah, I mean, the worst of it usually is like sometimes we get some crazy maintenance or whatever, like just something like that, or like sometimes there'll be an issue where like they release a patch that's messed up and then the servers go back down, but nothing like, yeah, DDoS related that I can think of.
Like what? I think was the last time that I remember the servers getting DDoS for like a few days in a row. But dude, that's been like almost 10 years at this point.
Yeah. It's definitely like, I wouldn't say a one-off, but it's definitely an anomaly right now. And if it happens next weekend as well, they 4 in a row is going to be a significant problem, I think. But I don't even know the details of how to combat a DDoS and how to stop that, because like it's a problem, but how do you fix it? I don't know.
I talk about
not-
class design on the internet. Like, I have no idea either. Microsoft has got to step in, bro.
Speaking of preventing DDoS, not that this even prevents DDoS, but in an absolutely, I don't even know if this is brilliant or diabolical move. Exit lag, like if you guys are familiar with the VPN service, like their company account or whatever, I think it was, starts showing up in a lot of the streamers' chats that were streaming, gifting subs as if to like advertise exit lag VPN while this is happening. And I saw it and I wasn't sure if that's what they're doing. And then I saw them in Peekaboo's stream and some other streams, and I'm like, there ain't no way they just came into a hardcore wipe of like 20 people losing their character to advertise their VPN.
God damn it.
Is that
I think
genius or troll? I can't tell.
I don't even know.
I think the only time that I've heard of exit lag is, I think, when I was looking to play on the overseas Lost Ark servers or something.
Me too. Yep.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Unrelated to anything DDoS related, our favorite topic, exploiters of World of Warcraft. They finally got
God.
punished. We're back. So as it turns out, NetEase removes Mythic Plus titles from... It says removes Mythic Plus titles from 9,000 Chinese players. I think it's 6,000 Chinese players, and 3,000 players got action for PvP win trading, is what it read. And in a very interesting turn of events, it was basically due to the Dream Surge buff in the Follower Dungeons. This lists Winter Veil and Lunar Festivals, but talking to some of the people who play in China, they were saying it's mostly related to Dream Surge buff and Follower Dungeons. And players not only who were abusing these buffs got banned, but players in their group who had people who were abusing these buffs also got, I would say banned, disqualified from playing. And then Blizzard proceeded to, or I guess NetEase in this case, proceeded to name and shame every single player who got actioned on their account.
I love the public shaming.
Oh yeah.
I think a lot of people had this notion about the China servers that they don't care about cheating, and I think a lot of that stems from how regular sort of like RMT or like gold sort of is on like Eastern games, and it's just not the case, right? Like that's just part of how they play games, but at the same time, like it has nothing to do with like, oh, we don't care, everyone just runs around and cheats. Like it is actually a very cool message that they sent out of like, nope, like we're owning all you guys. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think a lot of them really care about that. Like, I think it's good for the health of the player base that, like, you know, you don't have people cheating, running around with titles that they didn't earn. And I think, like, for the people who did earn their titles or, like, you know, could have, but just cheated anyway, because that's what M+ers do. Like, I don't think they really care that much about losing, you know, a title or whatever. And hopefully they were selective about the actions that they took, you know, like, if they're just some random guy who got the Zenkiki buff and some keys, that's kind of whatever. But if they were, like, blatant cheating, or like doing it repeatedly, or like doing it at the expense of others, hopefully they got some more serious consequences.
I think my only concern is, why did China do this? And there were reports that no one on NA or EU got hit with this.
I know somebody who was over the title cutoff and didn't get the title.
Oh, really? I thought most people got it on NA and EU and they didn't ban any.
Well,
Or
I mean,
prevent the
this individual may have, you know, toyed around with the Dream Surge buff some.
Ooh.
But Follower Dungeons, however, it seemed like nobody got their title removed for that.
I honestly think we just need to hear directly from Blizzard. Like, where do you draw the line at, like, where is this is an exploit in Mythic Plus, this is not an exploit in Mythic Plus line? Like, it's entirely possible that they consider follower dungeon buffs in Mythic Plus to be perfectly fine.
Yeah, well, so what's funny is you're laughing about
You're
this,
muted.
But I wasn't saying anything.
Okay.
Tunnels is laughing about this, but you know, back in the day, we had a system of warlocks that we had 2 warlocks parked outside of every dungeon on trial accounts. And when we were pushing keys in BFA, because there was no dungeon portals or anything back then, right? We would log into the warlocks, summon 2 people so that we could summon the rest, and then also hand out health stones. And we would go into every key with 3 health stones. And there were some dungeons that, like, I noticed that, like, I was like, okay, these are the bosses where we need these health stones, save them. And that was like totally normal because that's just how health stones worked. And like, that, and nowadays we would see that as like, somehow cheating if warlock had a raid buff and we took that raid buff and went into the dungeon or whatever. But like, it really is not clear where the line is, and we joke and we say this stuff, and like, I think the big problem is it's with the way that it's done, like the fact that you have to do weird shit in follower dungeons. Like, okay, this seems very obvious that the people are abusing it and they know what they're doing here. But at the same time, like, there never has been any sort of line in the sand and like Blizzard talk, any sort of clarification or like, what constitutes as a cheat, like pretty much anything. And so I think they do need to sort of come forward a little bit and like be a little bit more clear. Also, I think they just need more strict things in place, like why when you like maybe just when you walk into a dungeon, like it just I don't know, it's hard because like, what about flasks, what about food buffs, like what about pre buffs or whatever or something. I don't know, it's hard, but like, maybe clear all your stuff at the start of a run, or give everyone a food. I don't really know, but they need to do something about that or make it a little bit more streamlined. I mean, ultimately the answer needs to be they need to fix this stuff. Like, if you can get follower dungeon buffs for 1 week and then they fix it, it's like not really that big of a deal that you have arcane intellect. But like the fact that it's sat around for so long, which is kind of ridiculous.
They tried to fix it,
though.
right?
I don't know, man.
Allegedly, there were multiple ways of getting the buffs out of the dungeon, and so they were like, "Aha, we found it!" And they fixed one of them, and then there was just a bunch of other ways.
Yeah, like I honestly, the biggest thing with me is just the inconsistency of it. Like right now, based on the events of the past, we've had Zenkiki ban, follower dungeon buffs okay, dream surge buffs okay, using your cooldown and making it last into the dungeon totally okay. That's been around for a while. And then like stuff like cheating the dungeon routes via like the Temple of Sethralis, like go backwards thing, not allowed, but didn't ban. Like the graph is all over the place. In levels of severity, Blizzard has not said this level of severity is a ban. This level of severity is we won't action, but we'll fix it, and this level is fine. It's there's no gradual scale. It's like they're rate tuning.
Just like the raid tuning.
I don't know. I think I kind of wish they'd come out and say something, but at the same point, I do understand why they aren't. But yeah, I mean, like the Psychic Link stuff happened, and those people just like stayed on the leaderboard too. You guys remember that? Where
vaguely
you would Psychic Link, for those who don't know.
Like a critter.
Yeah, you would Psychic Link a critter in like Dragonflight Season 4, and then it would like insta-kill any mod that also had the link on it. And so people were using it to like cheese Alga Academy and Neltharis, and then Blizzard just didn't remove those runs from the leaderboard. That was ridiculous. But then they came out and stated that the Outlaw Rogue stuff was egregious enough to get changed.
Yeah, I think a big problem here is this is a little bit I don't know, maybe people in the comments can correct me here, but I think this is a little bit encapsulated in like the higher end serious keying. If you're somebody who maxes out at 12s or lower, the idea of getting arcane intellect from follower dungeon is like a complete nothing burger, right? Like I don't think a single person in 12s or lower cares at all about any of this stuff. Maybe the dream surge buff, that's a little ridiculous, but at the same time, like, most of the stuff is such a nothing burger that to, address it in some big capacity would be almost like them sort of admitting stuff is going wrong when a lot of people didn't even realize or care. And I think most of the people that do care are like, the small, serious type of key people, like, the type of people that would watch a podcast or be on Reddit. But at the same time, like, that still doesn't mean that maybe Blizzard can't, like, I don't know, have somebody that's in touch with the community and maybe write a post on competitive WoW or whatever. But I don't. Blizzard doesn't really seem the type to do that very often. Like they'll have their official, super approved public press release and then nothing else, right? Like they don't really have. Like you get it every now and then, like the video that Scarizard had with Max, for example, you get little tiny views into the Blizzard system, but not very often, and they don't really communicate outside of like a very official means. And it feels like these things are just not quite widespread enough or like important enough for the average player to like use that official means to talk about them. So I guess I understand why they haven't really done any sort of like addressing of the issues.
World of Warcraft players really like to be in the know with what's going on the inside of Blizzard, though, more so than most other games that I've played before.
I mean, I don't know that it's specifically World of Warcraft players, because like every game, people want to know why things are getting nerfed or buffed or where the line is. Like people just want to be in the know because it's a competitive game, and in a competitive game, you expect to know where the line in the sand as to the rules, But we just don't have that here, and that's okay. Somewhat.
We've told ourselves it's okay. We just want to keep playing our video game.
Well, 9,000 players got action to China. That's the end result. Is that Nettie's cracked the hammer down on these people? Very funny. Does this mean that they have 6,000 or 6 million runs from last season?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I sort of go along with what you're saying of like, it sounds like it may be some sort of error that got lost in translation somewhere. Like it does seem a little wild that there's that many. Like for reference, how many title holders are there on NA? Like
there's like 1,500 last season.
Yeah, like 1,500. So the idea that there's 6 times more people doing keys, it just seems a little out there. Like it seems like a lot, but maybe that's true. I don't know.
I don't know. It's something seems off. It makes me think that people were getting DQ'd that like weren't even over the title cutoff.
Yeah, like maybe they went down the list and they were I don't know.
You abused the Dream Surge. You were in a group that had the Dream Surge on it. You were in a group that had the Dream Surge on it. Your brother's out as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately this is just what we talk about. Like, it seems like Blizzard's gotten lax on going for exploits.
I mean, they were hammering people in Legion, and then they just kind of haven't since.
Let's be real here. The Jailer exploit was pretty rough, and probably something should have been said about that.
Did you? Okay, I heard that they were actually gonna like start looking to remove Jailer kills for a little bit for abusing that. Did you?
I heard a similar thing. Yes.
Why? Did we ever feel why didn't they?
No, they backed off. Apparently, is what I heard after.
Well, I think they will never say this, but a lot of times I feel like the problem with that sort of thing comes from the transparency of the issue. Like the fact that the kill happened and people did like they knew, like the players knew what they did, but I don't think Blizzard knew right away. And then sort of like as things unfolded and developed and other guilds did it, like then they learned, and that by then it was almost a little bit too late, because like once one guild does it, right? Then like I could definitely see guilds being like, when they hear about it, they'd be like, oh, we're not gonna do this, right? We're gonna wait and not do this strategy. But then when a guild kills it and does it and Blizzard doesn't say anything and it sits there for a few days, like, at what point is the strategy okay?
Yeah.
And it's like I feel like they didn't even know what was going on. And I mean, again, like you can say, screw that guild, like ban them all anyway for doing it and not saying anything. But I mean, like, I don't know. It's not really a guild's responsibility to explain how they did things to Blizzard.
I do think that Echo probably should have had some actions taken against them for Sneak.Lua as well, though.
Well, yeah, there's that fun Echo. Both of us have, like before everyone, all the Europeans hate me. Okay, both of us literally go right to Echo as soon as we thought about this, because I thought I paralleled this to the Plague Boar incident in MDI, right? And I feel like part of the issue with that was like they used a bug with misdirect that made it so it lasted forever, right? And like I don't know, like I would have to guess on their write-up that they didn't say that in the write-up, right? Like they were basically like, okay, here's what we're doing. We have a guy standing here, he's snapping plague boars. Can we do this? And they're like, yeah. I mean, I could be wrong. I wanted to be proven wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. And again, it's not necessarily up to, like if Blizzard doesn't know what the heck is going on, like, and then they approve it, right? Of course, like there's no world where they approve it and then Echo does it and then they're like, oh, now we ban him. Like
there's a reason the rules changed after that.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
there's a reason the rules changed after, and you have to explicitly state what your strategy is if it's anything short of normal.
Yeah, I mean that was where a lot of drama followed me around during that. Was basically me being that was the conversation, right? Was like everyone was like, "Well, they got it approved," and I was basically, I knew because I've been around competitive stuff, like how they did it, right? I'm like, okay, well then, can they show us what the message was that got it approved? Like, show us what they explained and what they didn't explain, and then of course they wouldn't, right? Because why would they in the first place? Like, fuck me, I'm just some cat with a waffle on my head. And then yeah, so that's where a lot of the drama around that TGP
if
started.
you know if they explained it correctly, they would 100% be like, Growl, we did it correctly. Fuck you.
Yeah, well,
they did it.
I'm gonna refrain. I'm gonna tread carefully now, but let's just say that I said what I believe in. Again, I don't really fault them because again, M Plus is the Wild West. Like most of the people outraged, like I wasn't even outraged by the incident. I was more just like talking about my thoughts on it, and then the chatters get in arms. But yeah, I mean, back then Mythic Plus was the Wild West. Like that was was that the first TGP?
I think it was a second. No, that actually was the first. You're right. That was the first.
Because I'm pretty sure we cheated in the second one too. It was either the second one or we also cheated in the first one. Because we were the ones that found. Well, it was Junkrat figured out how to snap a Marth out of Necrotic Waste, the second boss room, and we did it in time trials, so no one even knew until after the qualifiers.
Dude, there's a saying. It's like every rule has someone's name on it. That one's yours.
Yeah.
The boss cannot leave the intended area as an actual rule or something now, right? I'm pretty sure.
Dude, there was
the Junkrat rule.
There was one in Dragonflight Season 3 too that got changed. Like the time trials are literally the Wild West as well. Where time trials, some teams figured out if you mind controlled the stingers in Everbloom, that they did 1 billion damage. They were just annihilating the dungeon with the stingers, and then after the time trials were over, this tech mysteriously started appearing on live servers, and then immediately got fixed.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, I think Blizzard most of the time makes the right decision with what they do. It just sucks whenever it happens for such a long period of time, like the Dream Surge follower dungeon buff stuff, and they don't say anything, but you know that it's probably wrong.
Yeah. I mean, look, they ultimately can do what they want. People can make the choices of what they do.
Yeah.
And as much as people don't like us talking about it or get annoyed by it, I don't think we all think it's that major of a deal, but I think it's partially our job to sort of raise awareness about what goes on so that people can make educated decisions, right? Like, if certain competitive people are doing crazy shit, but not a lot of people know about it, it's like, well, maybe this should get aired out. So whether it's Blizzard does something or the community does something or people, some people, the most important thing about these things are people need to know. Like, I think if it's a bug that's fresh, like obviously you want to hurry up and get it fixed and report that to Blizzard. But once something is in the game for a while, then yeah, like as many people should know as possible.
I mean, you say that, but also the reason that we're talking about it right now is because it's just drama and people
drama. Yeah, so we got some other drama here. We don't want to get caught too much on this drama because we have other drama to talk about.
Okay, do you want to start with class tuning or do you want to start with the other drama?
We can take a little break while we recharge our drama. Some people have probably gotten steamed, walked away, turned the volume down. We got to let them recharge a little bit before we get back to the drama.
Okay, so Blizzard hit us with the post-race to world first class tuning where a lot of specializations, I think it was like 18 or something like that, specs ended up getting buffed. Like this was a crazy amount of class tuning. More classes got buffed than didn't, and then only a very few number of specializations ended up catching nerfs. I think the only specs that ended up catching nerfs were like Fire Mage, Shadow Priest, Windwalker Monk. Was there anything else that got nerfed? Oh, Prot Warrior. Yeah, Prot Warrior damage.
Mistweaver.
Oh yeah, and then Mistweaver.
The usual suspects.
Disc Priest.
The ones people expected.
Yeah. Prot Warrior, apparently this is like a 15% damage nerf. What Sense told me.
Yeah, I heard like 5-ish on single target and then like a lot on AoE, like 10 to 12%.
A lot of damage lost.
Yeah.
What do we think about the tuning? I mean, what are you guys' thoughts?
First of all, I think it's a week late. I don't know why this is this week and not the week before. I think people expected this last week and then it just didn't happen. Instead, we got Monday night Styx nerfs for some odd reason.
Did we talk about the Sprocket Monger nerfs last episode?
No, because those have it on Tuesday.
Oh my god, Sprocket. Okay, we have to talk about that later too. I forgot about this in the show notes.
Okay, just add it to the notes.
Yeah.
No, but like this class tuning, I think is good. I think everybody, no sane person, watched the Race to World first and was like, they're definitely not going to do any class tuning to like the triple stack Windwalker or the Shadow Priest or the Mistweaver or the Prot Warrior. Like, I'm pretty sure if you asked anybody who watched the Race to World first and asked them which specs are going to be nerfed, they could probably name those 4.
Yeah.
Like, come on. But the other stuff, it's fine. I don't think it changes anything, though, to be honest. I really don't think it changes much in the raid itself. You still look at sticks. You still look at One-Armed Bandit. You still want an insane amount of spread cleave. Like, Shadow Priest is still 50% damage ahead of every other like class on One-Armed Bandit just because of how annoying these ads are to kill. Because they're permanently spread and you can't skip them.
Yeah, I think they did. I don't know that much about DPS. It seems like their DPS changes were like very raid focused. Like they're just looking at single target, seeing what classes needed help on single target. Some of them had interesting consequences in M plus. Like I feel like a lot of the classes that got buffed were already kind of good. Ellie Shaman, Rhett.
Moonkin,
May see more of them. Yeah, Moonkin. Like basically those 3. I don't know if you play all 3 of those, but you sort of get the idea. I think healers, they sort of accidentally landed on like a really good spot in both raid and M plus. I mean, Mistweaver was like a big outlier in damage, mainly because they just like spew it out anyway, even if they're pure healing, and they took a damage nerf, but not much else.
Yep.
Disc Priest took a little bit of a throughput nerf, but a lot of times Disc Priest like does a lot of overhealing during the ramp anyway, and so it doesn't like it seems like a big nerf, but it's more like it's still a nerf, but it's more of a smaller nerf. Also, Disc Priest was just like seeing a lot of play in keys and in raid, so maybe you could argue they deserved it. And then we saw buffs across the board, I think, with like Prez and Holy Paladin, which were definitely like the healers that were most down bad. I think Holy Paladin is actually like reasonable in dungeons now. I don't really know about raid.
Dude.
Maybe you just fit it in just for the Devo aura or whatever.
HPAL on Sprocket is really good, except HPAL in the raid right now comes with a raid-wide debuff that if you wings during Lust, it lags your entire raid.
So it still happens. Okay, because I don't play with an HPAL, but we had a day where we were doing splits and we had 3 HPALs and they just all pop wings in the middle of my ramp and I just lag out.
You literally, like, here's my tip of the week. If you were lagging in raid, kick your HPAL out of the raid or ask them not to wings.
Isn't it the hero talent?
It's a specific hero talent. I don't know which one it is, but legitimately, it is so stupid that you have to do this.
Yeah, technically, you can tell them to just run a scuffed build and not kick them, or you can kick them.
But like we lost like a full day of Sprocket prog due to this and didn't know why. I think it's so dumb.
I'm
so stupid.
I'm sorry that you didn't know what it was. If maybe I should have.
I'm surprised, actually. Yeah.
I've known about this for like 2 weeks now, probably.
Oh, we just thought the server was crashing again. Like.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
It felt like for 30 seconds or for a minute of every rocket pull, like it was just.
Man, that's such a bad look, man. The fact that the servers have been so shit that that's happening, and you're just like, well, servers are getting DDoS again.
So, I don't play HPAL is probably like.
I think from a damage perspective, Growl kind of covered it from a healer perspective. I think from a damage perspective, most of this tuning made a lot of sense. Damage in raid it's historically tuned within around like 10% from top to bottom. This tier was a bit of an outlier. Things were around like 20% from top to bottom. So Blizzard looked to try to like there was a lot of stuff that was really bad, particularly in the raid this tier. And so Blizzard was trying to buff up some of them. You see some of the buffs as large as like Arcane Mage, all damage increased by 8%. Moonkin got like a 5 to 7% single target increase. Ellie Shaman got a 5% single target increase. There's some specializations that were just horrible right now. And then I think that overall it was just trying to make sure that they were bringing down the top a little bit from Shadow Priest, Windwalker Monk, and Fire Mage, and then bringing up the bottom just a hair.
But they buffed Og.
That spec still sucks. It's okay though.
It still sucks. It's about a 5% total damage buff, which not good. That spec is still dead.
Dude, what's up with this dev buff, by the way? How did dev catch a 5%er? They got a bigger buff than most other specializations got.
That's a buff, yeah. So it's a pretty big buff for dev. So the first thing was they nerfed the old tier because the new tier to the old tier, despite gaining 19 eye levels, was functionally identical. So they nerfed the old tier and made the new tier better to widen that gap to make all devastation evokers actually want to change. And therefore it caught a buff. That bug fix is like 0.6%. And so overall, it's like a 5% gain for Devastation Evoker, which is pretty big considering how good it is right now.
Are you playing dev right now by chance?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, congratulations on your
Yeah.
buff.
Well, okay. The thing was, right, at the end of last year, dev was one of the highest, if not the highest single target spec, because it kept getting flat buffs towards the end of the tier. That it was sitting over 2 million single target or something like that. And going from last tier to this tier, you were not gaining much. You were still sitting like your highest tier was so high, or your DPS was so high last tier that it was barely an increase. So I think they're doing this again with dev. And my personal opinion is they might be forgetting about bombardment damage not tracking correctly.
Are you not playing Firestorm a lot now?
Firestorm's only played pure single target.
People are playing in Mythic. People are playing in Mythic Plus too. Flameshaper Firestorm.
Yeah. But in raid specifically, you play it only when there's cleave. Oh, sorry, only when there's single target.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you play the AoE talent when it's only single target. That's correct.
Gotcha. Wait, how do bombardments not attribute correctly? It's easy to tell who the bombardments are on. It's just
bombardments are tracked like Aug Evoker. Because it is a debuff on the target that triggers a global proc when anybody hits it, and when anybody hits the target, it drops the bombardment on them. It counts as their damage.
Yep. It doesn't get tracked as the evoker's personal
details
damage.
for devastation doesn't work. I don't know if most people don't know this, but devastation evoker always appears lower on logs than it does, or on details than it does in logs. And other people are inflated with the dev evoker in the raid because they triggered their bombardments, and it counts as their damage.
I mean, it's not that much damage.
It's not that much.
Percent or two, I think.
It's a lot for the dev. It's not a lot for the others.
Yeah.
Well, right. The dev, it adds up. Yeah.
But dev did not need this buff, in my opinion, but I guess we'll take it.
Yeah, dev
But I have a feeling that they're not counting bombardments or something. I don't know.
I think if you look at dev and aug, I think it's just a consequence of the state of those classes, how they've been in since they've been released. Aug was, very, very good when it was released, all the way up until they just recently gutted it. And now I think they need to be careful about making it really, really strong again. So they're sort of like, okay, now it's out of the scene. Now let's slowly walk it back up until it's at a spot where we like it. And then dev, on the other hand, is like, why not throw these guys a bone? No one has been playing dev. I mean, sometimes you see it in raid or whatever, but at least in keys, like dev has been just completely non-existent since it's gotten released.
Yeah. I think one of the like, class tuning is good. That's fine. I think the biggest thing they need to address now is the niches in the raid. We haven't seen any tuning for the raid yet, but you have, like I mentioned earlier, Styx and One Armed Bandit are heavy spread cleave fights.
Okay.
Having your Boomkin, your Shadow Priest. Fucking Aflock is played on One Armed Bandit because the ads are just stationary, have a ton of health. Like, when was the last time that happened? And it's like one of the best specs. Then you have Muggsy, which doesn't care about your DPS at all, but only your ability to get out of a cage. A frame perfect leap or teleport or something. Like, we need that rated tuning to come in before I think, like, this class tuning is good, but the raid also needs fixes.
What would you fix?
For the raid?
Yeah.
One Armed Bandit probably needs a health nerf on the attendants, because the spread cleave on them is just a little too tough. I would personally also make the attendants not random, so that on Mythic, so that they always spawn in the same spot. And 3, I would make the coin blue line, like, show up all the way, because melee just getting run over by a random coin sucks.
But those are the biggest changes you'd make right now? just in total.
For what? Oh no. For one Armed Bandit, I would just take percent health off the boss, percent health off the ads.
Okay,
That's
but
it.
what about the rest of the raid? You said that we're in desperate need of raid tuning. Like, what all are you thinking?
Mugsy needs something with the goon cages. I think the most common advice is just like it when you kill the goon, it knocks everyone out and breaks the wall, like on heroic. I think that's probably and then maybe just a slight nerf on the healing check because the healing check is ludicrous.
Man, it's kind of weird. Like, is that okay that they release a raid and like literally every single boss feels like it needs tuning? Like, basically, they did pretty big changes to Rick Reverb, Sticks, whatever the one is with the one that I'm on, the rockets and stuff. And then now it's like One Armed Bandit, like Mugsy. Like people are saying the last boss is undertuned. Maybe this raid is like one of the worst tuned raids of all time.
I mean, I guess it would be a good time to talk about Sprocket, right, Tuttles?
What about Sprocket
pull it up?
Monger? Oh yeah, the
There's Sprocket
nerfs.
nerfs.
Dude, this is a fight that is pretty heavily nerfed by gear, and Blizzard decided that they didn't want Sprocket Monger to be like a very difficult fight anymore, and so they decided to reduce the health of Sprocket Monger lock and stock by 11%, and then they also made the Void Barrage, which is by far the hardest part of the fight. Fire every 2 seconds was previously 1.5, and then the Void Splash AoE damage reduced by 25%. Basically, if you ended up contacting one of these orbs in the last phase, it would probably kill. It's not going to kill off your entire raid, but it'll probably kill off like 5 players minimum. And by nerfing it by 25%, you're very unlikely to actually have people die now if you eat one of the Void Barrages. But the biggest deal with this is that by reducing the boss's health by 11%, you might actually kill it before the last beta launch sequence. I was thinking that this fight was going to get heavily nerfed by the Galagio loyalty stuff and gear just over time, but this is basically ensuring that you're going to kill this boss before you get the final beta launch sequence.
You still get it. You kill it shortly after most kills are.
Okay.
You might get the first orbs, but like, I'll be honest. On our first kill, we hit 2 orbs at the same time, and the raid just lived. So I think it's fine.
Oh, great! Wonderful. I was shocked that they thought that this boss needed a nerf.
I actually really like the way this boss is nerfed. So the way I would classify a boss like this is like sort of what people say is like a dance fight, where it's almost more or less the same every single time. You do have to deal with the colors changing and like knowing both sides, but for the most part, it's a dance fight of like the boss and the tanks are doing the same thing literally every single fight. You're just following along. And I think one of the best ways to nerf a dance fight is simply just the duration. You know, part of what made Silken Court or Queen's Court or whatever so annoying is that like it was so long. It was literally like this 20-page slideshow that you have to look at of like every different phase and where you stand, then go here, then bait this, then go here. And it's like, I actually don't really mind a fight like this if it's 5.5 minutes long, right? If it's like not too long, it's like shorter on average than most fights. It's like very intense, right? Like all your movement is very deliberate and you get punished if you don't do the right thing. But, you know, just like making the fight shorter and like skipping one very hard overlap that's going to, you know, like that one overlap at the end or like, you know, whatever might cost you 30, 40, whatever pulls. And it's like, you know, just getting that overlap out and leaving all the rest of the fight more or less the same is like, you know, a pretty good way of like nerfing the pull count and the difficulty of the boss.
I think that more fights should actually be kind of designed in a similar way to like how Sprocket Monger are. This actually might come as like a weird take, but I think that Blizzard really overemphasizes pass fail on some of the harder fights that they've been designing recently. Like you know, Queen Ansarek with the moats in the last phase. Queen Ansarek with the pops, that was like pretty heavy into pass fail, also killing ads in the intermission. There's a lot of pass fail that were on that fight. There's like some that's on this fight with like the mines, but a lot of it's actually predetermined, so it's easier to progress. And the big challenge of this fight was just the damage check in general. And I think that Blizzard has been moving away from actually making good damage checks on bosses, in my opinion. And if they went further back into creating more like better designed damage checks that passively get nerfed over time with things like the Galagio Loyalty Rewards Club, with things like gear, and then it allows you to skip hard parts of the fight, like the Void Barrage blasts in the last phase. That's going to make guilds that get there in, you know, let's say a month or 2 months, probably not even get that overlap at all. Where guilds that are proccing it early, they might have to deal with a pretty hard overlap. And I think that Blizzard should be looking to kind of create more fights that are kind of similar to Sprocket Monger and less fights that are like, you know, Queen Ansarek and the Silken Court, like Growl kind of mentioned.
Yeah. I'm mostly so I think the health nerf is obviously the most controversial one, I think. I think most people would agree that the rest of the fight is nerfs are perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I don't think like the healing check was pretty tough. It's now slightly easier. Like that's fine. Making the dodge easier, fine. I personally don't mind the health nerf. Given his position in the raid, I think that's fine. The issue is like One-Armed Bandit. Now having played it, the Race World first guilds made it deceptively easy. Like hugely deceptively easy. There is a lot of going on in that fight, and I think the pull count, like I actually think other than the last boss, the difficulty increase was about correct. One-Armed Bandit for the Race to World First guilds was basically heroic in a way. You knew all the mechanics, you just need to play it well and have the comp for it. Sprocket, you're going to waste a lot of pulls due to figuring out the strategy. Right? Like that's why I think that pull count is like so inflated high.
Yeah.
And now they're running to an issue where Sprocket got nerfed, which means that all the guilds are going to start getting walled against One-Armed Bandit, that they need to nerf One-Armed Bandit, but if you nerf One-Armed Bandit, then they're going to run to Muggsy, and so you need to nerf Muggsy. And then you probably have an actually decent curve in the over the entire raid.
Yeah, I want to see how it plays out. Like, I haven't gotten to those bosses yet. To me, the way that the jails sound, like having to pour it out and stuff, that sounds like total nonsense to me, and that needs to get addressed. But I do want to hold judgment about the bosses needing the nerfs or whatever. Like, so far, so our guild right now is we're 4 of 8, and we're not long into Sprocket, and so so far the difficulty curve to me feels really good. I feel like if our guild had less monkeys in it, we probably would have killed Styx a little bit faster. And looking at Sprocket, I feel like I've been doing some VOD review and kind of watching, and that fight doesn't seem too hard, assuming that you know what to do. You know, like if you just look at the strats or whatever. So far, I felt like the difficulty is good of like, 2 bosses that are like basically easy and you can kind of explain them very quickly. Then like Rick Reverb is like a little bit harder. Now like the 4th and 5th boss takes a little bit of study, but like the strats aren't too bad. And then like, now I'm kind of waiting to see how One-Armed Bandit goes, but I don't know. I'm still reserving judgment, but I like the other thing too is like, well, Gallywix isn't super hard, right? So I think that like, having a somewhat difficult 6th and 7th boss isn't necessarily the end of the world, Like to me, although you might say it's a better difficulty curve to have like, 75 pull boss, 100 pull boss, 300 pull boss, like I would almost rather have it split out between 3 different bosses, like all the same, like have 325 pull bosses.
I mean, Instant Dollars and Fat Shark Yes both killed Gallywix in, hold on, ID killed in 62 pulls and FSY killed in 87, but both of them also sub 100 pulled Muggsy. But again, I mean, look at the comps. They were comp stacking for it. Triple Mage, triple Windwalker, a bunch of Mistweaver monks. Looks like, yeah, a triple Mistweaver.
Okay, well, look at One-Armed Bandit comp right there. Look at that One-Armed Bandit comp. 4 Shadow Priests. Like,
yeah.
There you go.
3 Shadow Priests. Like, there's a reason that all these guilds are making One-Armed Bandit look so easy. And if you don't have that comp, the same thing that Styx had. Oh yeah, still 124 pulls. Like I said, deceptively easy from the Race to World First guilds. Like, kudos to them for killing that boss fight so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Max did say it. Like, he was like, we're playing out of our minds. We're playing well. People mentioned Echo was playing very well, too. Like, we sort of brush it off as like, they always play well. They're Echo and Liquid. But it does seem that way a little bit when people are getting to these bosses. Like, how big of a gap there is. I mean, even like you look at, for instance, the pull count that Echo took on Gallywix versus the pull count that these other guilds are taking. Like, Echo is like, was the least geared, I assume, just because the other guilds are doing splits, but Echo got there much earlier. And then Echo is like, what did Echo kill it in? Like 40-something pulls, 47 or something?
49.
Something like that.
Yeah, and then all these, like, that's a big jump, right? Like 80 pulls, 90 pulls, 100 pulls versus 40-something. Like, they are very, very good players. Sometimes it's hard to notice until you, like, really look at it and think about it and, like, see that sort of stuff.
192 pull Muggsy, 48 pull Chrome King Gallywix. That's the sauce right there.
Yeah.
Okay, and that moves us into the Preach video. I guess this is a good segue. It's quite nice.
Oh yeah.
Where did we want to begin? Because I don't think that we need to necessarily talk about his video too much. I think it's probably better to just kind of talk about some of the points that he made in his video. So For those who don't know, he came out with a video called Race World First Recap. Blizzard should be embarrassed about this raid.
I'll talk about it a little bit at first.
Okay.
I'm gonna give him some good points here because I like mostly disagree with literally every word that comes out of his mouth. So I do want to address like the things that I want to like, give him some credit where it's due. So this was a video that he posted, but technically this was a live stream. I believe this was his first live stream when he got back from the Race to World First, and this was simply a snippet or like an hour of that live stream of him talking to his chat. I always think that live streamers should be held a little bit different accountability to videos because you don't necessarily have that ability to be like, oh nope, I didn't. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, or let's cut that one out. Like live streams, sometimes you just say shit. And so this is basically him talking about his thoughts on the Race to World First. He talks about difficulty. He talks about other strange things. Also, I think that Preach has been such a great contributor of the Race to World First for a very, very long time. I think he makes the broadcast so much better. And I don't ever mean to say that I don't like Preach or think, you know what I mean? I think a lot of people say some weird shit on the internet, and this is not what I'm saying at all. Yeah, but basically he talks about the race, talks about how like essentially, I mean, the TLDR is he essentially like talks about the Mythic raid as if the only purpose of the Mythic raid is the Race to World First, and he basically says like, oh, like there was no way that a guild in second place could have won because the last boss was so easy, and like the difficulty curve was bad, and he kind of throws some like weird points about like Styx being too hard and some of the other bosses being too hard, but like Blizzard actually stepped in and like nerfed them pretty dang quickly, and I think his comments were even after the nerfs, so it's not like this stuff is really affecting basically any guild. And the last thing to his credit is while there are a lot of people that Mythic raid and do do this stuff, I do technically feel like there's probably a hell of a lot more people that don't like will ever care about the race, like the Mythic raid, and they only just watch the Race to World First. So as silly as it sounds, like maybe there is more credence in Blizzard putting a lot of effort to design literally design the entire Mythic raid around the Race to World First, and then just patch it up for other guilds after, because of how big of an event it's become to the point where like some people who aren't even WoW players are watching it, and then like only a small percentage of WoW players even Mythic raid. And I think the scope of and honestly, you have a lot of guilds, like, I'm not going to name any names, but like Humble or PC, who just like, want to be super tryhard raiders and go really hard at the raid. And they love really, really hard raid bosses. Like those guys who are Mythic raiding are not asking for easier bosses.
Yeah.
Like they are not asking for Muggsy nerf and nerf this, do this. Like they want to fight the hardest versions that Liquid fought. So even they probably appreciate the ridiculous like bullshit bosses and want the really hard 300, 400 pull bosses too.
Just a quick question. Do you think it's a problem if Blizzard like designs some of the bosses in their hardest possible state and then nerfs them quickly, assuming that they actually nerf them quickly? I know that Blizzard will sometimes leave them in a state where it's too hard for too long, but assuming that Blizzard nerfs them quickly, do you think it's a problem if they release them in like an initial like Race to World First state and then nerf them rather fast? Or do you think it's something that they shouldn't have been released in that state and we have just gone way too difficult in terms of what bosses have become?
No, I think that's how they have to do it, because they can't buff them, right? Like they can't just be like, all right, we're adding 10% health on Styx this week. Like that will not go over well, right? So I think in order to do, like, while it feels dumb to be like tune in every week and see bosses get nerfed and nerfed and nerfed and shaved, and it's like it almost feels like they're kind of just like nerfing the bosses just for the sake of helping the guilds. But realistically, I think they do that to some extent. The problem is, I think that in the past, at least, they've been really slow, and that's sort of what I think Squishy was saying earlier. Is he sort of expects them to be slow with Muggsy and One Armed Bandit and stuff too, and that like if they really do come out 1 or 2 weeks after the raid, or even like during the raid, or sorry, after the race, or even during the race, but like after the reset, and like put these big nerf bats on these bosses, I think that's totally fine. Like I think that's sort of the best of both worlds, right? Like you let the really try hard guilds fight the hard bosses, but then nerf them before any normal civilian gets there.
Yeah. I think it's weird though, because now you have multiple different combinations of things going in, right? You have the loyalty buff, you have the gear, and you now have like this nerf set that usually comes in. And when that nerf set comes in is questionable, considering it's whenever Blizzard feels like it. But I think it's fine in theory.
Okay.
Because people do want to watch the hardest content and guilds going, head to head. I think that's reasonable. It's like, why do people watch the MDI? Same thing. They want to watch, essentially, I think, Echo and Liquid going head to head on the final boss and going down to the late night and see who kills it first. I think that is a completely reasonable and expected thing. So I think it's fine. But you're also comparing a group, like what is essentially, a pro sports team with their coaches, their physiotherapists, their doctors, their
professional chef.
With the professional chefs to Mr. Street Hockey who plays with his friends on weekends. And having to compare those two and design something for that level of difficulty, it's clear the Race to World First people are well ahead and continue to grow further ahead because of the number of splits that they continue to increase and the level of skill and weak auras and coding that continue to be developed. So if Blizzard wants to, go for the Race to World First, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
People want a good show, but you have to bring it down for your general population after.
Yeah, I don't really. It's hard. It's hard because I don't know. They're just such gamers. Like they're on such another level as everybody else, and the gap also like gets bigger, right? And then you add into the account, you have items, right? Like that's the scary. That's I think the hardest part of I had to imagine with Blizzard when it comes to balancing and tuning this stuff is like. Keep in mind, we're also shaking so many different things up every single season.
Yeah.
When do you get your spark? How many crests do you get? How many crests does it take to upgrade? What week do the crests come out? Like, what are the drops from Mythic Plus? Are there good trinkets from Raid? How good are they compared to, the trinkets from M Plus? And it's like all these things is this giant balance whirlwind. And I think that another big problem that I had with the Preach video is that he's sort of like, Preach probably talks to and knows a lot more Blizzard people than any of us could, or at least like me or people that I talk to. And I think that he probably knows how intelligent they are and like how much thought gets put into this stuff. And I think he's almost like giving them too much credit about like they wanted this tuning, like they expected that Styx was going to be harder than the last boss. I just think that wasn't the case. Like I just think it's really freaking hard to tune raids, and like unfortunately they just missed the mark here. And yeah, I guess the most annoying thing is like I just think that 100 pull bosses or like slightly more are just by far way more fun than 300 pull bosses. And I worry that we've talked about how Blizzard sort of has this like knee-jerk reaction all the time with things where like, something gets overblown, then the next tier comes out and it's like completely on the other side and they like make it way too easy or way too hard. And I kind of worry that the vocal public opinion about this race is like, oh, the end boss was so disappointing, it was so easy, and then next raid we're just gonna get the scariest, baddest like motherfucker we've ever seen. It's just gonna be this like giant robot with like 17 phases, and he just like takes 700 pulls. Like that's mainly what I'm worried about the consequences of this. Like obviously everyone's allowed to have their opinion, but it's like I don't know. They do need to come back and nerf the bosses fairly quickly and like make them reasonable for most guilds, I think.
So one of the biggest opinions that I think that most people who are like actively rating Mythic, and I've seen this like parroted, that the reason that they had a problem with the Preach video is that he kept talking about the difficulty of this raid being far too easy, and most people sit there and they're like, hold on, wait a second, I think that this raid is closer to where it should be in comparison, closer to where raids just in general should be, especially whenever you're comparing it to the last couple of tiers that we had. We had Nerevar that was historically hard, and the tier before that we had Amir still, which was historically harder before Nerevar, right? And it's like we had Fyrak into Queen Ansarek back to back, and for a lot of guilds, there's a reason that guilds are kind of starting to die off. We kind of we had a podcast episode maybe a couple months back where we were talking about how fewer and fewer guilds are continuing to form, and that Mythic rating just in general getting so much harder, and the expectation that you're a race roll first level you have race roll first level preparation on your bosses just isn't sustainable for a lot of players. And so then whenever Preach goes in and it's like, yeah, Blizzard should be embarrassed, this raid is far too easy. I do understand how Gallywix is too easy. I think that most people would tend to agree, but most people would then disagree that the raid itself is too easy because it was only 550 pulls. For most people who are actively raiding Mythic, they're like, that's way better than what I've just had in Nerevar. Please God, do not send me back.
I think people would prefer 550 pulls spread out over 6 bosses, then 400 pulls on the last 2 bosses.
Yeah, I think that that's correct. And if you look historically, so prior to Jailer, Sepulchre was, at the time, a historically hard tier. This is crazy, right? But
Yeah.
prior to the Jailer, it was very rare to actually have an end boss that was like over 200, maybe 250 pulls. It very infrequently did that happen. It happened sometimes, but it wasn't super common. Then after that, Blizzard just like flipped the switch and was like, all right, we're about to just like give you infinite pull bosses. You had Razageth, you had Fireak, and now you had Queen Ansarek after that. And it's like the players very clearly who are actively playing Mythic were not responding well to that, even though the Race to World First was doing quite well. But I think the Race to World First, assuming that it's competitive, can still probably do quite well and not be, you know, a 2.5 week Race to World First or whatever we've had for the last couple of tiers.
Yeah. Growl,
It's hard. It's hard. We'll see. We'll see how the later bosses go. And you know, to double up on what he said, I 100% agree that Gallywix should have been harder. You know, I think
everybody agrees.
They take those 30 or 40 pulls off of the sticks and Sprocket and then put them on to Gallywix, and I think we have a good tier. Minus, I don't know Muggsy yet. Like, I just haven't got to that boss yet. But I think that's just my worry is like, you know, there's such a big sentiment around the idea that Blizzard is making the game way too hard to the point where it seems inaccessible. And I think they've actually made a very big step in Mythic Plus, trying to simplify things and like making most of the difficulty around just like dodge and do a lot of damage and, you know, sometimes kick, but mostly just do the boss mechanics. And I don't want to, and also like, in this raid, I feel like they didn't make any crazy, ridiculous bosses. Like, to me, a raid that has a Tindril in a raid like this raid, like, to me, Tindril and Fireak was an absolute brutality of, like, difficulty compared to this raid, right? Like, to me, this is like a, let's call it a 3 out of 10 error of difficulty in terms of, like, how players feel. Tindril and Fireak and that, dude, that was like an 8 out of 10 error. 8 out of 10 error, sorry. Like, that was way more egregious of an error, but nobody talks about it because, oh, it was so crazy to watch the Race to World First, and Max said Tindril was the greatest boss ever, and Tratnos first drafted Fireak and his boss, you know, whatever, and it's just like, man, if anyone who played those bosses with people that aren't, you know, monsters are, I don't know. And I hate to just constantly complain about difficulty or whatever, but I think if you're listening and you think that we complain about difficulty too much, you know, I think there's just a limit to it. Like, you just have to take our word for it that this stuff is ridiculous. And Mythic raiding and doing a lot of the Mythic bosses is really, really fun.
Yeah.
Like, I heard from Max that he made a comment, something along the lines of like, yeah, I understand why people want easy raids. I know Mythic Plus people just want the easy raids to get the easy loot. And it's a, you know, not really. I like raiding. Like, it's not about it being easy. Dorky actually put it the best that I've heard it described. When you're doing a raid, you want to constantly feel like you're progressing. Like, you want, after, if you've pulled a boss for an hour, you want to feel like you are much better at this boss than you were an hour ago. Whether you have a couple better pulls, whether you figure out how to use your cooldowns. That's the fun part about raiding, is pulling the boss, seeing improvement. When you have a boss that's 300 pulls, you can pull a boss all night and go backwards. Like, you can be like, oh man, like, you know, what do we even do with this part? Oh no, we need to move this cooldown. We need to do this. Like, and you're literally going backwards. Like, I feel like at some point when a boss has too many pulls on it, you don't see that improvement in that, you know, progress through the raid. And to me, all of the fun of raiding falls off when you stop seeing the progress and you're just like ramming your head into the wall, hoping that somebody figures out something.
Now, I will say, and this is the reason that I think that Gallywix is too easy, is that it lacks kind of like tension at the end of the fight. A lot of end bosses, but most bosses in general, should kind of have this level of like, you don't kill it kind of out of nowhere. You know, you can kind of kill a first couple of bosses out of nowhere, especially with a couple people dead. But I think that Gallywix lacks like a real enough damage check to the point where all the kills that we've seen thus far they've kind of killed the boss from like 35% to 0, which is pretty uncommon for final bosses. And I think that the lack of like a real final phase damage check, or lack of like tension for the final phase is something that's going to end up holding Gallywix back from being like a great boss. And that's why I think that most people will cite it as a little bit too easy. But that's why, like Sire Denathrius, Sarkareth, both of them were similar pulls on like the initial kill for like a Race Roll First as Gallywix, but both of them had tension in the final phase, right? They had a damage check that you were going to see. You were going to wipe in the final phase a couple times before you kind of had that pop-off moment where you got that final kill, where Gallywix kind of lacks that same level of, just like explosiveness at the very end of the fight.
Yeah, it was so bad for the race, right? Because it was like...
Yeah. Nobody knew the
we were
boss
literally
died.
I think I even mentioned this last pod, but we were literally in a voice call with like, doing keys, hanging out or whatever. And then Dorky or someone was like, are they going to kill it? And I'm just sitting here thinking like, bro, they just got to the boss like 2 hours ago. What do you mean are they going to kill it? And then I tune in and they're at like 20% health. I'm like, what do you mean are they going to kill it? This is the mythic end boss. 20%? Like this isn't enough. And I'm like, wait, they're going to kill it. And they just kill it. And it's like,
I mean, I think it's also like the Glaf Hasp full side and like the other side is the last boss has never ever really just been about straight damage in a long time, if not ever. Like low mechanics, just burn. And I think that could have actually worked out really well if the number was right.
Yes, exactly. I think that
I like
yes.
Tension can come from just like what is essentially just a straight DPS check. Like, granted, like this is one extreme, but if Patchwork was a final boss, it wouldn't be the most exciting thing. But if it was a really tight DPS check, like, oh, okay, Liquid's getting down to that 1%, 0.5, and they wiped at 0.2, right? Like, there's a level of tension there that can come from a DPS check. Like, obviously, one way to increase tension is to increase mechanics, but we've seen in Mythic Plus, we've seen in Raid, people want to move away from the one-shot mechanics or the extra kicks and all this other kind of stuff. So designing a boss that is more very basic and high, just focusing on do your damage beat the enrage, I think would have been really cool in reality.
Yeah.
But the numbers and math were just wrong.
So I actually think that Blizzard needs to go further into more frequent damage checks. And I think that like, kind of like I was talking about earlier, Sprockenmonger, I think is a good example of that, where, the fight, the initial kill, the damage check is actually pretty hard, especially whenever you're really undergeared. But as you get more damage and as you get percentage HP gains, then the damage check is a lot easier and the fight still feels like whole, even though you're killing it before some of the most insane overlaps. And I think if Gallywix had something very similar, where your first kill, or like whenever you're trying to do it like super undergeared, the damage check is kind of real and the fight feels, again, whole, and then you get more of that gear, you get the Galagio Loyalty Rewards Club, and then Blizzard needs to just go way harder, in my opinion, into damage checks and less hard into 1,000 mechanics are being thrown at me at the exact same time, because that has been like, that's an insane thing that's happening, and there's so many swirlies this expansion. Like, I don't even understand what's going on with all the swirlies and all these bosses.
Like think about this. If I had to ask you what your top 3 bosses were from the last couple expansions, what would you say?
Well, what's the cutoff?
No specific line.
Like my
just like
favorites?
Yeah.
Painsmith, I think, was a banger. That fight rocked.
Growl, do you have any off the top of your head?
Favorite raid bosses. I always have like a weird appreciation for like the easier bosses.
I like
so like I'll say mine.
Okay.
If you want. Sludge Fist, Kai'Veza.
I liked Argus. I liked Gul'dan. I thought both of those were cool too.
Mm-hmm.
Sludge Fist was also a banger, and then Painsmith I think was also sick. I liked all of those.
I thought Smolderon was a pretty fun fight. I know that was a little bit of a healer fight.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I definitely will echo Painsmith. I enjoyed that. To me, that wasn't that crazy. It wasn't as fun of a healer fight, but it was like, it was a fun fight for sure.
So the interesting thing, and the point, I just wanted to see what you'd say, because I think this is true, is that the majority of fights liked by players are the single target bosses with low mechanics and a hard DPS check.
Most of those that I listed were single target fights. Argus, not a ton of mechanics, and like the damage check was real on that fight.
Yeah,
though.
no, I agree.
Like Painsmith, dodge the spikes, do the weird like spiky thing where the range go out, and then do the intermission. And you have like a little bit of cleave at the end of the intermission, but that had a hardened range of the spikes closing in the middle.
Yep.
Right? Like Sludge Fist. The mechanics were don't go a different way than your chain partner, do the grip, and burn the boss. Like all these are very and Kaiveza, I know touted as probably the best fight of Nerebar Palace. Single target, very few mechanics, kill the boss. So why can't a last boss be a very single target focused boss with less mechanics? It seems like that is just a recipe for success, assuming there is an actual enrage.
Yeah, I feel like they have a certain formula that they like. Not every raid abides by this, but it sort of feels like the middle like the middle to the middle end bosses are where they like to put those like single target sort of checks. I feel like they always have to have some like really annoying, stupid like ad fight near the end where it's like this would be fine if it was like a second boss, but you made it the penultimate boss and now we're having misery.
Yeah.
They do that a lot. It feels like the last boss, they care a lot about having multiple phases with multiple different damage profiles where like, you know, like there's been so many bosses where it's like, oh, there's soaks in the beginning, or there's like groups of ads that spawn, you gotta cleave, but like the end is single target. And I feel like they try and like make, you know, like they sort of have a formula, right, where they like try and make bosses a certain way. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And then thinking back, like there's a lot of other bosses that I didn't name, but bosses like Rashinon, I think is like a super fun like middle boss where it's like not too hard to just kind of run around taking damage, single target fight. Another boss that I've liked that I kind of hate that people shit on was Guardian of the First Ones in
That's crazy.
that same raid. And I think that boss would have been really, really fun if it was the second boss of the raid or the third boss of the raid, right? Like everyone hated that boss because they were like hoping it was going to be Sludge Fist 2.0, but I still think the boss design, everything about it was fun. Like it was just tons and tons of damage, pretty short, like DPS check, and it like wasn't really that crazy. Like I don't know, I think lots more fights should be like that, you know?
Dude, I'm a monkey. If you give me single target boss damage amp phase, like I'm like, oh,
yeah,
this
exactly.
Is the
Yeah. I think, I think it was. I think Preach is like to go back to the Preach thing. I think it is kind of embarrassing that the boss kind of just fell over. I think that's absolutely factual. People were disappointed, we talked about last week, but I think overall, I don't think there's any conspiracy here. It's just somebody did the math wrong.
Yeah.
I think the raid is a lot closer to well-tuned than he gives it credit for. And I think it's and the biggest issue that I actually have with the video is he was like, yeah, Nerebar and Amir Jusil were better raids. I'm just like, hold on, hold the phone.
Yeah.
This is, and I just like watched this raid up like this is way closer to something that feels like digestible from a player than going back to the last couple of raids. This is like ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean that goes back to like, you know, the perspective that Preach has, right? Is like I don't even think he does the raids anymore. Like he just wants to watch them. He sees some epic raid with tons of cool bosses that created tons of good moments in the Race to World First. Arguably, those races were better for the viewers of the Race to World First, right? I mean, it's sort of along the lines of like, you know, back when I remember I first started in BFA and Preach would talk about Mythic Plus, and it's like, yeah, for Preach, an ideal Mythic Plus is like a loot pinata where you get all your items and then you go raid, right? Because he was like a big raid logger guy that like doesn't really like him plus, you know? And it's like the problem is that lots of people play the game lots of different ways, and I think that like the harder you make these bosses and the crazier that you make them, unless you nerf them very quickly, they, you know, it's like who are these bosses even for aside from like, you know, the top 50 builds.
My question is, do you think Mythic rating will go through a similar thing as Mythic Plus? How people wanted less complexity. Like we saw the big difference from season 1 dungeons to season 2 dungeons. That, you know, like I think it took a couple seasons for that to happen, but we finally got dungeons to a place where people were like, yeah, I'm happy with this complexity. This feels fun again.
I think they're doing that, but it's a much, much slower process. Like I think that they're slowly trying to like remove giant pass fails, slowly trying to like make things more about damage. But I think it's like I don't think there's gonna be anything like we saw with from one raid to another, one season to a season. Like I fully expect we're still gonna see a lot of mechanic bullshit, like stupid bosses or whatever.
I think like prior to Sanctum of Domination, the Race to World First was actually like the Race to World First is still cool, even if it's like only a 1 reset race, or it like goes right after the reset or something like that. Assuming that it's not like Tuesday day of or something like that. But like the raid can, or the Race to World First can still be cool. I would, again, I think that the splits are like honestly the worst part of the Race to World First. Watching multiple days of splits to try to get as much gear as possible is honestly the bigger thing that's going to kill the Race to World First, not Gallywix being too easy.
Yeah, well, that puts that added to the pile of things that made this raid so shitty for the Race to World First is no heroic week. Like I'll say,
Yeah.
look, I'll say as a player, you know, the longer you gate my Mythic Plus and my dungeons and all the stuff I want to do, the more upset I am, right? Like,
Yep.
I get that we need a week to explore the new zone and do the story. I've conceded to that, but the idea that we need to give up a week because of the Race to World First, I'm not necessarily on board with. That being said, I 100% agree that no heroic week sucks for the players in the Race to World First and for watching the Race to World First.
I mean, the argument is constantly made. I think like a lot of people think it sucks for the devs because they don't know what to tune for.
I mean,
Nerebar
wasn't well tuned, and we had a heroic week. I'm not going to give them that one.
Yeah. So, how do you guys, tuning wise, we've heard the no heroic week, and we've also heard the Gallywix wasn't good because we didn't test it, right? Because it was like a new boss. It was different from heroic. How much do you think that either of those things, if you have a strong opinion, matter in terms of tuning for the raid and for classes?
I think they matter a 2 out of 10. I don't think they matter at all. I think it's really hard to tune this game. Like, I think that is the biggest issue. It's just very hard to tune this game well.
The level that Gallywix was missed and the level that they hit on Muggsy, somebody just made a numbers error. Whether it was like a small multiplication error, they entered a 0 instead of a 1 or something like that. Like, they missed by a lot on Gallywix. That is not like anything but an accidental mistake in my mind. So, yeah.
That's sort of how I feel too. I agree with both of you guys that it definitely helps them. Like, it's no doubt that testing a boss and having a heroic week and having one more balance patch won't help them. But I will say that, you know, there's examples, like Tuttle said, both ways, right? There are bosses that are untested that are really good. There are bosses that are tested that are fucking terrible. You know, there's heroic weeks that have been terrible. There's non-heroic weeks that have been good. You know, we're sort of like across the board.
What did you think? You have in our show notes something about data mining bosses, Squishy. What did you want to say about that?
Yeah, so the first thing is it kind of just relevant to the conversation. A lot of tuning happens during the Race to World First. We don't post it because bosses that are in the future aren't relevant to the majority of our audience, and most people won't generally care. And realistically, I'm kind of the opinion that data mining is part of the Race to World First, whether you like it or not. And so having data mining capabilities is part of, you know, each team's preparation in a way. Just like how you have a weak aura person, you have a data miner on hand because it gives you a lot of information about what the raid is. And I don't think that realistically, unless it's super important for me to get in the way of that. But that being said, there were a lot of things that were said by Preach about data mining that didn't exactly seem to be completely truthful in the video. Everything that was data mined about the Mythic Gallywix fight was in the fight, to my knowledge. Like, I put up a post right before they showed publicly about all the data mine spells that I had been tracking. I'm pretty sure all of them were in the boss fight. Most people did not know what they were because they were just swirlies on the ground, but they were there. I don't know anything about data mine voice lines that weren't in, but the things that weren't reported on were, it's pretty well known, Muggsy and Gallywix took a health nerf before both guilds got there.
Yeah, Galley took like a 9 or an 8% health nerf or something like that, right?
It was a very big health nerf. Would it have changed the race? Absolutely not.
No, the boss was like 15% health too low, but the Muggsy one was kind of needed. So like they were clearly looking and tuning based on what they thought, and that's kind of why I think the numbers were just completely wrong on Gallywix. But there is also, just to clear it up, they never encrypt anything with the secret phases or anything like that. Anything that
you saw on Gallywix, anything that you saw on Jailer was already in the data. There is no encryption. The hard part is finding those spells. Sometimes they make it easy for you and tell you the name of the boss in the tooltip. The Jailer casts a shield. Well, I wonder what's going to happen there. It doesn't happen on normal or heroic, so I guess it's Mythic.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a lot harder, though, if it says something like, the caster uses a shield. You don't know what that is. But there are ways to find out in the data which of the spells are likely attached to a boss.
Okay.
That at least that the Race to World that the Race to World first guilds have taken advantage of. So they will be tracking those spells and should know the general idea of estimated DPS to kill a boss and any secret phase mechanics that come around.
Do you
This
subscribe?
isn't hidden.
Yeah. Do you subscribe to the ideology that Blizzard wanted the race to end? They were just like over it, and they were like, all right, I don't even care about him being well tuned. Just get us out of here.
Holy.
Given the timing of the nerfs, no.
Okay.
If they were on Muggsy, and then they nerfed the boss and put in that health nerf, I would say yes. But Muggsy, I believe Muggsy and Galley were shipped together, like at the same time, which means that I don't think that's right. So, yeah, you can tell a lot via data mining.
John Wowhead dispelling the rumors. You heard it here first.
Yeah, there's no encryption. Everything is always in the data. There was no secret phase that was supposed to be decrypted when Liquid got to 0% and suddenly revealed it to the world. No, everything was there. It wasn't a secret phase, but a secret fight, and that's kind of cool in actuality. How did you guys like that?
That was a cool boss. Like, I think that the only issue that I have with the boss is that it just had too little HP. I think that they thought that the pass fails were going to be a little bit harder than they ended up being, and I think that there was like it seemed like it was just a hair easy, and the damage check wasn't relevant enough. But if the damage check is relevant, I think that fight is like, it could go down as like an all-time fight. I think that fight is really cool.
Yeah, it was definitely close. It was just a tuning issue, right? It was simply just a tuning issue. I think everything they did about that fight was cool. Like the room was cool. They had the area denial. Like Gallywix was like, a very much a big character. Like they had the not secret Mythic mechanics, but like they made the fight very unique for Mythic. Like there was so many possible dubs that got overshadowed by the fact that the tuning sucked, and it did suck. Like it was definitely anticlimactic for sure for the raid. But
having to jump off and like get life grip or jump off and alter time and then port back and like throw the bomb midair, that is honestly such a cool mechanic that I think got overshadowed by the fact that the boss is easy. That is actually, whenever they were first pulling that boss, and hopefully Liquid doesn't get mad at me saying this, but they were pulling it off stream, and they were like, this has to be a bug. There's no gate. They're like, is this a bug? Like, what the fuck is going on here? And then they were like, eventually they were like, I guess we just jump off and throw it, and maybe Blizzard will respond to us later. I don't know what Blizzard's response was, but Blizzard was probably like, yeah, the fight's working as intended.
it was maybe all the porting and shit on Muggsy is intended too.
Well, that fight was bugged. I mean,
I'm pretty sure people are just doing Muggsy wrong. But like the other way is supposedly harder. There's a couple ways to break the walls, right, on Muggsy.
Yeah.
One is the spears.
Yeah.
The second and only the second way is the rocket, I think, right? The rocket breaks the walls.
I don't know if it does a Mythic.
I thought it does. Maybe I'm wrong on that. The third way, and the only other way that I think they intended for you to break the walls, was to run a mine into it.
Yeah, I mean I'm pretty sure that's the intended way. The problem is like actually controlling when the mine contacts the wall is ridiculously hard because you can't. So Blizzard did something smart where roots don't break on the mines because the mines don't take damage. The downside of roots not breaking on the mines whenever the mines don't take damage is they can't break the roots. Like so you'll like mass root the clump of mines and they're stuck in that root for 10 seconds and they're not coming out. Or, and maybe this is what Blizzard thought you were going to do, is you're going to bring a druid who's going to single root a mine, and then he sees that the mine it's primed, it's ready to be, the wall is ready to be broken, and then he swaps the root to a different mine. It's like, we're back, and then that mine's stuck. Then that mine's stuck in a 30-second long root. Like, what are we supposed to do about that guy? But don't worry about him; he's going to be there for us later.
We have to calculate the velocity and the distance to the wall. So
The
it hits
yaw.
at the perfect time.
So I've calculated the yaw of the mine, the velocity of which it will contact the wall. And it's like I think that's what you're supposed to do on the boss, but the boss isn't able to be done that way. Is the problem?
It's really funny. Like if you don't do that, you kill the goons on Mythic, and then the person inside is just trapped in AFK until the walls break. Like, did they expect? Like, is that fun?
No.
Like, did they expect that to be fun gameplay? Like,
no. Dude, we did the fight like that on PTR testing, where we were using the bombs to break the wall, and I remember leaving that boss like, this is the hardest boss I've ever done. Surely the Race World First Guilds will cook up a strat that other people could use. And man, they literally just like are porting out. Like, yeah, of course they're not using the strat that we were trying with on the PTR because it fucking sucked.
So yeah, that's Galley.
Okay. Cool stuff that we've seen in WoW this week. Have you guys seen this? So Mythic Plus titles came out for Season 1. Asterisk, people who got score in the post-season of Season 1 also got awarded the Tempered Hero title.
Oh, no.
I heard this. I never verified if it was true because it was too much work.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's something that I hear right away that I'm kind of like, is that true?
I mean, there were people that talked about it on this post-season.
Man,
Yeah,
like...
I got title with 32-39 in the real season, only 35-74 in the postseason. Yeah. I think it's real. I got title thanks to postseason score, not intended. 32-39 in season 1, 35-74 in postseason.
Almost like they forgot to take a snapshot or something. And
hey, I mean, good for them, I guess.
Now I'm logging in. Now I'm seeing if I got the title.
You got to log into the character that you got the title on. So it'd have to be a priest, right?
Yeah. What's the title called again?
Tempered.
Yeah. Tempered Hero.
I don't think it matters too much. It's kind of funny though that it happens. I think is like
I think so too.
Again, this only affects probably like we're talking tens of people per region that got postseason score that probably went above the title that weren't supposed to get it. And I don't think it's realistically something that Blizzard has to go in and like revert. It's not the sanctity of the Mythic Plus title. Like 1,500 people this season get it. It's there's no sanctity. It's 1,500 people. But congratulations if you got it via legitimate means. Congratulations if you got it via the postseason score, I guess. Okay, what is this that you got, Squishy?
Oh, this is the new Cinderbrew tech. Where you wall climb. Surely this is on the level of clever use of game mechanics.
You won't get banned for
won't
this.
Get banned for this. So you just hop up, like after you kill the beat boss, you just hop in this corner, and then you just jump up the wall. And then you jump to the final boss area. It saves you like 10 seconds.
Okay.
Which is pretty cool, but you beat your party up here and you look cool doing it, so
Yep, I did that today. Everyone's like, what are you doing, Growl? You AFK, you're still in the room. And then I just, bam, jumped in there.
There you go.
It does save a little bit of time, when you're in that really tight Cinderbrew because your team sucks, then you're still farming the neck even after week 4. You can jump up there to make yourself feel a little better.
Okay. You mentioned that. What the fuck is going on with dungeon loopholes this season?
What do you mean?
I don't know. So one thing I noticed today is I am gearing up my druid. I need a weapon. So I'm like, what dungeon has a staff?
I knew you were going there.
I'm like, what dungeon has a staff? So there are only 2 staves in the entire dungeon pool, right? Yep. One of them is the one from Rookery that has less stats on it, that has like the proc, right? Yep. The other one is from Mechagon, which also has less stats, and it has like the zap on use 45-second thing. So there's no actual statted two-handers in the dungeon pool at all.
Yep.
I mean, and then there's 2 necks.
2 necks.
Only in the whole dungeon pool. And it's haste mastery and crit verse, with like the haste mastery one is very high haste. So if you're like a heavy mastery class, you're just like, what the heck? Like Og last season, or like at some point Og was like wanted high mastery, low haste. Like what neck do you even use at that point? Use the raid one, I guess.
I think there's 2 cloaks as well.
It seems like there's a lot less loot. Yeah, I don't know. What's funny is I kind of vaguely remember this happening in season 1. Like I kind of remember like having trouble getting like certain pieces like wrists or like belts or something in season 1. Maybe it was just like in my head, but I remember like not having a pair of wrists and belt on like 2 or 3 different characters. So yeah, I don't know what's been going on with the dungeon loot pool. It seems like they're tinkering with something, but
It's okay. Theater of Pain has 3 rings.
yeah, true. True. You can if
That
you need a
never
ring, you
changed.
can go in there.
I got another piece of text since Squishy brought up the one in Cinder Remetery. If you want to skip bubbles in Operation Floodgate, you can actually either water walk or invis potion and run through the water to be able to skip bubbles. You can also do some meld pullback stuff and meld them off with your tank. But what you see right here on screen is Yoda's just demon hunting across the water while the rest of his group is stealthed with DK water walking and just completely running over the water. And there's a jump starter that's on this gate that's right here that's sleeping. You're gonna have to pull this instead. But this is a much easier mob to pull than bubbles, fortunately enough, and you don't really care.
Bubbles.
That mob is hard. I mean, the mob is just really tough.
It gives no count too. Like not no count, but like
He's
very little count.
He's 20 count in a 470 count dungeon.
Yeah. And you basically are forced to pull him single. So
yeah, that's a rough mob, and there's like very little space there. Yeah, that's hey, I like new routes.
Look, we're on the topic of like skips. Do you have the like last mini boss and top skip?
How is that mob still so demonic? I actually played for 2 weeks and I didn't fight that mob one single time. Literally one. And then I'm in a random like pug group or whatever, like an 11 or 12, and I just fight it, and I'm just like, wait, what is this? Like, how is that mob still so demonic? The mini boss right before Zav and Theater of Pain.
He's hard.
Yeah, the one that AoEs, right?
I literally haven't fought him this entire. I didn't fight him at all during the PTR either. He's actually hard.
He's awful. So or she, I don't know, but either way, that puts up a 20 or a 12-second buff that AoE's damage for 50%, or so attack speed increased by 50%, and melee attacks AoE for 45% damage to the tank. Down to the tank.
Cool.
So one of them doesn't do any raid damage, and the other one that you just skipped there does. So yeah, if you just didn't see that, you basically just go 3, 2, 1, you run past the mob.
I haven't pulled him at all this entire season.
Yep.
Even my pugs skip this mob. Even my pugs know that we're stamp roaring and running through. Like nobody even thinks anything. Somebody just like immediately slams a pull timer right here, and then you start running most of the time whenever you're in a pug.
Yeah, that mob. So one of them just has the blaze. It's fine. The other one is just demonic. And if you ever fight that mob, the tank needs to use cooldowns while the buff is up. Otherwise, your party just gets demolished.
Dude, I apparently still have the Growl VOD running in the background. And look at this. Look at where we're on now.
This is yeah. So I basically, after the servers are DDoSed, this is like 20 minutes after, I finally can get back into the game. Like half of my guild is just dead. And I just walk back all the way from Blackwing Lair to Ogremar, and then I sit here for a little bit, and then I realized that like I'm probably just gonna log off this character and never play it again. And I wanted to find a good home for it, and I eventually go to Brill, which is the city outside of the undead starting area, where we hosted our role play undead meetings, where all the drama started. And I thought it was fitting to sit alone in the Brill town hall where we had our guild meetings at the start of the game.
Oh, that's
and there was just random people in here like RPing or saying, "What the fuck are these guys doing?"
Well,
okay. Let's move on to Q&A. If you want to submit Q&A for the Bench Podcast, you can either tweet at the Bench Wow on Twitter, DM the Bench Wow on Twitter, or DM me on Discord, and we can add your Q&A to next episode's show. For this week, we have a question from Morax. He says, are there any specs or classes that you feel like should have gotten the mid-expansion rework treatment that Rogue or Demon Hunter got in Dragonflight?
What immediately comes to mind?
Is it Brewmaster Monk?
No.
Okay, what is it?
There's a meme answer, which is Og.
I think I actually am right there with you on Og, and I would actually rework them instead of giving players main stat and crit with like Ebonite and Prescience, I would actually give them like damage procs that had like an ICD, and that would that way you're not reliant on your DPS actually being like dealing all of your damage. Instead, you're reliant on your own individual skill of like keeping up your ebb and might or making sure the target is prescience, because there are players that like that style of gameplay, and having procs that proc off of the player's spells that you're targeting with them, and then trying to maintain your ebb and might, that's an individual player skill thing that's cool, and it's not reliant on your monkey DK in a 10 actually doing adequate damage. And so I think that would I would love to rework AUG like that. I think it sucks the way
I think so too. Flat damage instead of main stat works. Okay, think about this, right? Like Cook. All right,
I'm listening.
The corruption effects. You just give AUG the ability to buff your DPS with different corruption effects.
All right, man. Actually,
you give Twilight Dam to the tanks. You give Gushing Mood and like.
So delete AUG and then replace it with Dark AUG, and then it just corrupts your teammates.
Oh my god! You proc slappers! You proc slappers! So AUG, obviously, I think, dude, they just that spec is in shambles. I would completely change that spec.
They killed it this time. It's clear that they're like, it's time. Like, we don't want you around anymore right now. Whether that's just we don't want you around right now, or we don't want you around so we fix you. Like, we'll see what happens there. But AUG is definitely a number one for me, I think.
For me, healer wise, I don't think there's any I actually like the design of a lot of healers right now, specifically Arshan. They did a good job fitting some buttons. Probably could keep going there. Mistweaver, the dev finally started giving it some love, and like Dragonflight, I think it's in a decent spot now. I think Dispriest, I really like the way Dispriest sort of like can exist in rated M+ now. It was not like that for the longest time. Some big problems. I think Druid has been in kind of a weird spot over the last 2 expansions where they tried to simplify it, but it sort of just ended up being, if you can spam regrowth and it does infinite healing, then Druid owns, and then if you can't spam regrowth, it sucks. Like, they sort of like took a lot of the power out of the HOTS, and I think that like it hasn't really been popular in raid like once, even though it's been okay. Like, I would kind of like to see some more like major Druid resto specific changes. I know they've been hacking away at the class tree. The other one that's kind of in a weird spot is like Prez. I think that in like pug situations where most people play, I think that having shorter range and like limits to your abilities is just like a little bit too much. Like, for me personally, as like a try-hard healer guy, I really like the unique differences that Prez has. Maybe there are a lot of people playing Prez that enjoy it, but I do think they might need to homogenize it a little bit, sort of like what they're doing with AUG, and sort of like bring it back in line with, make it more similar to the other healers, and sort, give it its own like niches in different ways, I guess, rather than like, because no one wants to play with a Prez when it's like short range and like doing weird shit. Like, that's the biggest problem, is even if you like Prez, it feels like no one ever wants to play with Prez.
I mean, the problem with just from like a DPS perspective, the problem with playing with Prez is like, as a ranged, I don't want to put like I position around the mobs in a specific way. I don't want to position around the Prez who's positioning around the mobs, and it's like like Prez has to be really good for me to want to like play with Preservation Evoker. And every single time you play with it, you're like, man, I wish this spec sucked a little bit more, so I didn't have to play with it again.
My other 2 answers, like not AUG related, are Shadow Priest
again,
because Psychic Link thing, and just I'm of the opinion that Psychic Link is just not, I don't know what the word is here. I don't want to say not healthy, because it works, but like just periodically doing AoE damage for doing your single target rotation is just like weird.
I would prune that out of most specializations that are doing it right now. A lot of specs are doing it, not just Shadow
Don't you think
Priest.
that happened with this expansion? I feel like it was a consequence of hero talents. I feel like so many specs more, and to be honest, in Mythic Plus, it's not really even that bad, because like it kind of makes more specs more viable in a way, in like a stupid way, but I feel like a lot of classes have that. Like, that used to be a thing in as like that Fire Mage had in BFA, right? We're like, holy crap, you can single target combust and it ignites the mobs and does AoE. Like, that was like a niche that some classes had, where now I feel like so many other classes can do it.
So I was looking into this recently, and it happened actually in Dragonflight with the talent tree revamps for most specializations. I don't know exactly why, but my best guess is that a lot of specs were upset with their inability to be meta in Mythic Plus, because some specs, kind of like Fire Mage that you pointed out, were just very dominant. And there were some specs like Balanced Druid or whatever that weren't affected by the target cap, so they were also very dominant. And then a lot of specs had the developers had an epiphany, and they were like, hold on, we need to make all of the specs at least have the ability to be viable in Mythic Plus. And then Dragonflight Season 1 started, and a lot of specs had the ability to be viable now, and so then it happened. And I think it's actually a good thing, but I don't like the way that they've approached it, so in the past, it was, I'm paying a 25% DPS penalty on single target to play for AoE. That's not healthy. But now it's, I do my single target rotation and I do AoE at the same time, which is also not healthy for a different reason.
I also think that the way the Shadow does it isn't exactly healthy for like low keys either. Like it only applies to your dots, or like even just like questing as a Shadow Priest is the most miserable thing in the world.
Okay.
Because Shadow Crash is a cooldown. And like if you go into Delves and you just don't have Shadow Crash, you're doing 0 AoE damage or applying Vampiric Touch to everything. It's just like odd. And then the memes start where you have Psychic Link where it's like goes from 20 to 25%, goes from 25 to 30%, goes from 30% down to 20%. It's just a constant function of their single target damage. And it's just odd. So I think like Psychic Link, that aspect could probably take a rework. The other one being, I think for me, is Unholy DK. I think Unholy is struggling. Partially because of the complexity of it. Like, you do a crazy amount of work to do mediocre damage.
Is it really? I swear I was watching Dorky, and again, Dorky's like kind of he's a guy, so I could be just getting trolled here, but I was watching Dorky stream, and he's like, no, Unholy DK is like super easy. All you do is press 2 buttons.
On AoE. On AoE, it's super easy. On AoE, it is literally press Dark Transformation, drop Defile, and then either mash Scourge Strike or Coil, depending on what the target is.
Yeah, exactly. That was it.
And I'm not even exaggerating. That is like all of the buttons. Like it's not even an exaggeration. That is literally all the buttons that they press.
Yeah, some guy was asking Dorky for help today in his stream, and he's like, "What do you mean? Like, look, I'll narrate all my buttons," and he just keeps saying Scourge Strike, Coil, Scourge Strike for like literally 40 seconds straight. I'm like, oh. And then he's like, "Okay, now you're not in cooldowns, and it's single target. You have to play the game."
That, to my knowledge, it is more on the more complex side, and as I guess we never really talked about it. DK and the whole like inability to bring DKs to raid because of the lack of a raid buff and grips this tier. We never talked about that, did we?
No, it is.
I mean, it's so dumb. Like they just need like at this point, you just give every class one raid buff. Like, what are they doing? Stop like, oh, now Shaman gets a raid buff. Like, I don't know what. Like, I just don't get it. Like, just give every class a raid buff. Bring one of every class to every raid because that's just what you want for the health of the game, or that's what they want, and then just leave it at that.
I don't even know if that would fix it for DPS DK. Because why would you bring a DPS DK unless they're good when you can bring a Blood, which for some reason has half the cooldown on grip?
Yeah, I mean, that's happened in a lot of tiers with a lot of classes. Like, that happens with Windwalker sometimes, happens with Warrior sometimes. I think that's just like a concept. I mean, it happens with Ret Paladin, the Holy. I think that's just part of the, And again, like, I think for an average, like, random guild or whatever, it's like, hey, dude, you have to play Holy for this raid, and you're in an AOTC guild. Like, that's just sort of a thing that happens.
That's fair.
I'd probably hit Druid and Rogue hero talents. Like, I don't even know if I necessarily need to rework the specs themselves, but the hero talents, particularly from Druid and Rogue, are still pretty bad. They hit Hunter, which is good. Hunter was terrible. Like Dark Ranger maybe still sucks even. I don't really like Dark Ranger that much. Yeah. But at least they're looking at Hunter. I would be looking to hit Rogue and Druid hero talents next, because Rogue and Druid hero talents are pretty subpar compared to some of the other specs I'll play. I'll play like my LA Shaman, and I'm like, wow, Stormbringer's so sick. I'll play my Og, and I'm like, God, Scale Commander goes so hard. And then I log up my Druid, I'm like, God, this hero talent sucks.
Like, honest question about hero talents, do you want them to stay? They said they're going to be evergreen. I actually think hero talents would be better as borrowed power.
I don't like that. No, I actually wish they would go away. I think they're like all right.
I think so too.
I don't think they're that egregious. I just don't find them fun, and I tend to agree. I think they would probably be better as like Borrowed Power or Covenant, where I never have to see them again. And the coolest parts of them could just get baked into some of the specs that they were popular for. Like, I think the Scale Commander
sounds like exactly what Borrowed Power is, right?
Well, yeah, the Scale Commander bombardment stuff is like badass for Evoker. I wouldn't be shocked if that like stayed for Og. Like I don't know about Dev necessarily, but for Og, it was really cool to like CDR your Eons with Bombards.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Fellsguard thing for DH where you just kind of explode every time you press your buttons when you enter meta. Like that's sick. Like that can stay.
Yeah, exactly.
Or what are some of the like other cool ones? I don't know. Fuck. Not Rogue. That's
most
for
of them
sure.
most of them are okay. Like you know, I don't know if necessarily Unholy DKs love Sand Lane, but I think the Sand Lane one is kind of cool, where you get this
the
blood
DK
beast.
ones.
You get this blood beast, and you just Rite of the Apocalypse is also badass. I don't really know how you fit that one in, but Sand Lane is kind of cool for Unholy, where you build up this big blood beast, and he just does 1 billion damage. I could see them keeping that in some capacity as like
the Scythe.
Frost. Oh yeah. The Scythe from Reaver's Mark or whatever. Reaper's Mark. Yeah. That's cool. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think that they could. I don't know if they necessarily need to rework a bunch of classes, but I do think if they hit some of the hero talents, assuming that they're looking to stay, wouldn't be too opposed to that. If they're just gone after this expansion, they don't really need to hit them again, though. Like, whatever.
Yeah, we're opening a can of worms here, but I think
we are.
I generally like borrowed power. I don't really have that much of a problem with. Like, they bring it in the game, they try it out. You know, it's temporary, and then you sort of keep the cool stuff that your class liked, or that Blizzard thinks they liked. Like, I don't see anything wrong with that. Also, I think that with the whole defensive creep thing, like, and many other problems, like, I don't even know if I like the current hero talents or the regular talent tree. One thing I wanted to point out too, just very, very small before raid, I've been watching like our guild now, and I'm sure many other guilds are using the liquid reminders thing or whatever, or the ERT note weak aura thing. This is going to make the defensive creep situation so much worse. Like, now that you actually can literally be like, okay, everyone's pressing personal here and personal here and personal here. Like, okay, Liquid and Echo could do that, but a random ranked 100 guild was not doing that. And now that every single guild, you actually can just put on the idiot screen in your guild to press their buttons, and they don't have to think anything about it, and we'll just press them. I'm like, this is actually so powerful. Like, the heal check, you were talking about the heal checks on Muggsy. I feel like the heal checks are going to get nasty with how good people will get pressing defensives using these add-ons.
I miss whenever my defensive was actually used to like mitigate tick out damage on like Agrimar or a fight like that, as opposed to being used to prevent myself from getting one shot on Razageth. The feeling of those two things were like a Neltharion getting one shot by the bombs. There's like a very different feeling. It's like, oh my god, my health is ticking down very slowly on Sludge Fist. I'm gonna bark here. This is gonna be sick. Or the alternative is, oh, I'm about to get one shot. I better call for an external or press my bark skin or die. It's just like just a very different experience for sure. All right. Any final thoughts on this episode before we head on out here?
Yeah.
Go. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about with the raid. There's still lots to. I've been doing keys. I'm finally starting to dabble into like 14s and 15s. I've been playing some other healers, so hopefully we get a nice juicy like M+ episode coming up. Now that we've been talking about the raid for a couple of weeks, we look forward to next week. If you guys submit questions like M+ related questions, I'd love to hear those as well. So I think that's kind of where I see next episode going.
Maybe we could get AVADE for a future episode. I don't know if I don't know if it'll necessarily.
I heard
happen.
AVADE doesn't go on podcasts.
Maybe we can manifest it into existence. If you guys type AVADE in the comment section, we'll send him all the comments of you guys typing that, and maybe we can convince him to come on.
I love AVADE.
I love AVADE. Random final thought: do any of you watch Severance?
I have finished the final season today.
Hell yeah!
I do not.
Good show.
I highly recommend Severance. The final season fucking owned, and they just got renewed for season 3. You should watch it.
I didn't necessarily think that they needed like a new season after season 1, frankly.
Well, they're getting a season 3.
I don't know where we're going from here, but yeah, sure, I guess. Do you know where was it filmed in Canada? I'm not leaking anything. Was it filmed in Canada?
Part of it was, yes.
Okay.
Episode 4 of this season was.
Yeah, I saw some stuff that looked like some Newfoundland Islands, and I was like, is the entire season filmed there?
Tattles, are you getting into the GeoGuessr?
No,
that's a curse, by the way, from GeoGuessr. Is whenever you watch movies or shows and you see stuff, and it's like, oh, this is in Romania. It's like, no, those are Denmark bollards. Okay, I know what this is.
Do you know?
You're not fooling me.
You know, like the abandoned towns, like off the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador, Growl. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, kind of.
There's an episode that was like I've seen like pictures of them before, and it was like, I was like, where did they get? Where is this all filmed in Canada? I was like having a moment, bro. I was trying to figure out where the show was filmed.
Yeah, episode 8. Yeah, you're right. It was episode 8.
It's all good. No leaks though. All right, we're out of here.
No leaks.
Watch
Later,
it.
guys.
Bye.
Goodbye.